where I'll start being able to answer some of your questions after all the league events. But obviously this is a big week, a week that MMA changed for the better. I think it changed for the better for fans, changed for the better for fighters, changed for the better for commercial partners. With PFL acquiring Bellator, we now have the opportunity to continue to change the game. We've always been a disruptor. We've always been an innovator. We now have the fighter roster to become a co-leader in MMA. And so with that opening, I'll take any and all questions you guys have about any topics at all. Just let me know what you want to know.
Well, as you said, kind of a historic season, I guess, overall, especially with the news. But just tonight, the championship, another one in the books. What are your thoughts overall on tonight and the year as a whole?
Well, just tonight, look, as a fan, I want to see more knockouts, right? But you can never control that. Look, you put 6 title fights on the line. You never know what's going to happen. But did I think the fights were high quality? Sure. But do I love La Problema fight the best? Yes, it's a knockout fight. But what I always love is the meritocracy, right? You get Pineda coming out, and it's a real-world Rocky story. Braga and Pineda, they're $10,000 fighters. They worked their way up from the Challenger Series. That's what PFL is all about. January this year, nobody in MMA knew who those 2 guys were, including you guys. And you know more than anybody in MMA. Forget the fans. Nobody. They're real-world Rocky stories. They won the Challenger Series, then they knocked off everybody to get their shot here. So I love that fight also. And that was a nice war, an unsurprising war. So to me, there are always great stories, whether they're champions or underdogs. But in the PFL, the best have to beat the best. But sometimes the unknown beat the best. And so I love that fight also.
To the effort of finishing fights, I saw a lot of people online tonight saying, what about elbows, at least for maybe the championship fights? Obviously not during the season, but could we maybe look at tweaking the rule set a little bit for showcase fights and championship fights?
Look, it's a great question. What I did say on Ariel's show is Bellator will follow the full-out rules. Because when you have one-off events, you don't need to protect like you need to protect for the season. In order to have 4 fights in a row, you cannot have the elbows. And it seems weird to change those rules for the championship. It's almost like playing different rules in the Super Bowl. So I think for now, it's really nice to have those consistent rules, but with the one-off event product now under the PFL umbrella, those will be a different set of rules, and you'll have not only no uniforms there, but elbows there.
Yeah. 2 last ones for me real quick. We don't normally get to talk about matchmaking because the season does it, but now you get to, right? So with Problema, you mentioned you loved his fight. He said he likes Ngannou. Obviously, you've got Bader as the reigning champion with Bellator. So what are your initial thoughts there? Do you do champ versus champ? Do you put him in the Ngannou mix? What's the thought? Initially, champ versus champ. Everybody's earned that. You've got to deliver what everybody's earned. So champ versus champ, right down the line. And then after that, it's all fair game. Right. But also we have a little bit bigger plans for Francis that we're trying to put together. We'll see if we can put those together. But then after the champ versus champ, then we'll see what happens. Well, that kind of leads me to my last question then. Does that apply as well to Larissa and Cyborg? Because, Kayla's the fight that a lot of people didn't want to see, but Larissa is the champion in that division. So is it champ versus champ down the line there as well? It's champ versus champ. Well, Larissa's earned that, but will Chris then fight Kayla in 2024? 100%. That is going to happen. Chris will have 2 fights in 2024. Kayla have 2 fights in 2024. One of those will be Chris against Kayla. But we think that Larissa has earned that. Once again, you have to give them champ versus champ. Chris is the champ of Bellator. Larissa's the champ here. So you've got to see that fight happen first. And then coming out of that, though, you'll see Chris Cyborg against Kayla Harrison as the next fight in 2024.
Hi, Donn. Just coming off of that, was there a reason why Cyborg wasn't here to do the face-off? I think everyone really liked those face-offs and noticed that she was one of the only ones not here. Yeah, there were about half the fighters that could make it and about half couldn't. We weren't able to invite them until 3 days ago. The deal didn't close until Saturday. We didn't make the public announcement until Monday. It's obviously a holiday week. So even you saw Ryan Bader was able to make a Zoom appearance but couldn't come here. So we're able to invite everyone, but only half could make it. We're only rolling this out to our employees on Monday, and the Bellator employees on Tuesday. So we're really pleased that even 4 champions could make it. Is there any worry that Chris might retire and not come into the season? Because I know that she's boxing, she's talked about potentially retiring. Is there any fear about that, or have you had talks with her? We have not had talks with her yet, but Chris wouldn't be in the season. She would be on the pay-per-view or the one-off Bellator events, just like how Kayla wasn't in the season this year. So both, Kayla and Chris would just be in the one-off events next year, not the full PFL season for sure. And in terms of retirement, we haven't talked to her, but all fighters always know
when they do and don't want to fight. And that's not anything that we ever control. But I think she signed a big contract. I think she wants to add to her legacy. I don't think she needs to do anything to earn her legacy. Her record speaks for herself. I mean, she's one of 2, 3, 4 of the best to have ever done it in the female MMA community. But I think she'd love the opportunity. We have 2 of the greatest fighters in the world, in Kayla and Larissa, that she's been tested against in the last 5 years. Who wouldn't want to do that?
Last one for me. Kayla was back here and she mentioned that she did not want to wait around for Chris. Do you have a plan for her in the meantime if Chris is going to be fighting Larissa?
We will develop a plan for her in the meantime. Kayla has earned the right to fight the best, and we'll make sure that she is happy and that she has really, really good fights.
Thank you.
All right, 2 questions here. Now with the acquisition of Bellator, is it going to be one big fighter pool, or are we going to separate it? Like have a Bellator conference, a PFL conference?
Yeah, great question. Think of it as one big fighter pool. So separate 3 things that we've talked about. All fighters now are PFL/Bellator fighters. One company, one fighter pool. Second thing is we have different products. So we have a league season, we have now one-off events, and we have pay-per-view super fights. So there's 3 different ways that one pool of fighter can fight. Which product is right for the fighter and for the fans? And lastly, we have different brands. So the brands go against the products, but all the fighters are eligible against that. And that's just merely an example of what's the best fit. Some fighters don't want to fight 4 times a year. Some can't. That's why we have the different products in terms of the one-off events and the super fights.
And now the super fights that you're talking about, the big names, the Ngannous, the Jake Pauls, do we have any timetable on when we're going to bring them into the picture?
Yeah, we've been pretty consistent on this. So Jake Paul is Q4 of 2024. He needs a full year to train. He started training about a month ago. There's 2 to 3 really interesting fights that we're working on with Nikisa and Jake, but I think that is October or December of next year. Francis, 2 possibilities, early or late, and that's opponent-driven. We don't want to force him early to have a worse opponent, but I think he'll either be, call it March timeframe or October timeframe. But both will fight in 2024 in the PFL. It's just what is the right opponent, and we don't want to force it.
All right, thank you.
Donn, you made a lot of fundraising calls this past year. What is it that actually stuck with investors and had this big round of funding coming in?
Yeah, it's a really great question. Most people understood that MMA is big enough for more than one leading company. It's not a United States sport, it's a global sport. And when you look at the global fan base, all of you know there's 650 million fans. UFC, a great company, but they put on 40 events and they do a different approach and a different product than PFL. So we said 650 million fans, they need more than 40 events. There's 5,000 basketball games. There's 3,000 soccer matches. Can we at least get 100 great events a year? So our view was we don't need to compete with, beat with, take share from UFC. We're going to be a co-leader doing something very differentiated, very unique. There'll be 2 big, valuable companies. That's the basic pitch. And this is a sport that all of you know is very new. 25 years old is a business. Basketball, 75. So as we all studied sometime in high school or college, the growth curve is just starting. The monetization is just starting. The evolution is just starting. So that is really what people understood very well. Now maybe the people who don't really study call it the evolution of business, or call it the larger global fan base of MMA, or what's happening in terms of the trends I talked about. They go, it's the NFL. There'll never be another one. That has nothing to do with MMA and nothing to do with what is going on with those underlying drivers of media companies want more, fans want more, fighters need another home. Well, all you need is media, fans, and athletes, and all of those would like to have another co-leader, and we're well on our way. This year we did 40% of UFC's viewership. What? Our brand is only 5 years old. Our brand is way, way, way ahead of us with much more marketing. So for us to do 40% already before the fundraise, before Bellator, before we launch new products, we're on our way.
Great, thank you.
And then Donn right here, so I got 2 questions. So first question, obviously with the Bellator acquisition, I would say most fans can agree that the most stacked division in Bellator is the bantamweight division. We don't currently have one on the PFL roster. Is that potentially something you guys could look to add next season?
Yeah, look, there's 2 big divisions, 185 and 135, where Bellator has probably the 2 best fighters in the world. Apache Mix could beat Sugar. Doesn't have the hair, but he's got better fighting. And I think most people think that that's either a good fight or Apache's a slight favorite. but it's a damn good fight. Same with Johnny. So those are two divisions of which maybe number one in the world. Well, we didn't want to come out with those divisions this year because that wouldn't serve those guys. We're going to come out with those divisions probably in 2025. So we need a full year to build divisions strong enough that it would make sense in the league season. What makes sense this year? Put on fantastic fights in these 8 major events that we've talked about. So think of the 8 events as huge events on their own. When you see UFC, we all see what are the 8 or 10 best events they have of their 30. We want to make these 8 events almost that big. 2 championship belts on the line for all co-mains for those. Put them in the great cities of the world, at least 4 in Europe, a couple in the Mideast, a couple in Far East, maybe 1 in Latin America. Have each of those be tentpole events and have those worthy of a Johnny, Apache, the people that aren't in the season this year against the best opponents. It would make sense.
And then one more. I know you touched on the viewership. So I've spoken to a lot of fans, and while we all enjoy the fights that you guys put on, I have noticed that some of them say that the pacing of the broadcast can sometimes be a bit. So is that something you look to change and address now that the roster has increased?
Yeah. As you guys have heard me say, we don't want to be right, we want to win. All the time, we're self-critical. What's working, what's not, where we can improve, where do we keep it the same? We've looked to try to balance storytelling with pacing. The storytelling is there because a lot of our fans, half of them are sport fans, but they're new to MMA. So they don't know the fighters like those who love MMA know the fighters. That made the fights longer. So you see we've taken some of that storytelling out, pushed it through social and digital channels earlier, but taken it out of the broadcast. Do we take more of that out to give you more action right in a row? We're always looking at that kind of stuff. But this year, half of our viewing audience was new to MMA. That's why ESPN's liked us. We're actually growing the sport and the fan base. But as my mom always says, no free lunch. The more you do some storytelling to let people know about the fighters, the more time there is between fights. But are we always talking about it after every time? Yes. We're always talking about all these trade-offs and trying to say, what do fans find the best trade-offs? And we'll always keep looking at it.
Donn, what can you tell us about...
Yeah, here and then here.
What can you tell us in terms of the conversations you've had with the Bellator fighters so far? Obviously, it's just been a week since everything was finalized. In terms of, what are their thoughts on your vision, the PFL's vision, and everything moving forward?
Yeah, here I've not had these conversations except tonight. I talked to Johnny, Apache, Patricio, so a few of them I talked to tonight. But Pete Murray has talked to them, Ray Cepho has talked to them, Mike Kogan, who'll be coming over to work with us, has talked to them. So I'll pass on their feedback, which is more broad than the 3 conversations I had tonight. And people, I think, would have 3 things to say. Number 1, super exciting. Remember, they think of themselves as the best in the world. So they want to be the best in the world. And they see us building a company that wants to be bigger and better and not stand still. So that's good. Number 2, more opportunity. Bellator was not growing with opportunity, not growing with more fighters, not growing with more events, not growing, with more divisions. So more opportunity. And number 3, like all of us, hey, what's it mean for me? And I got a little bit of anxiety until I know what it means for me. And so we'll be talking to them over the next week, the next 10 days to say, what does it mean? And as we've said, fighters will have a choice. Are they going to be in the league season? Are they going to be in the one-off event product? What's best for them? What's best for us? What's best for the fans? So I think that's all going to work out really good, but until we're able to communicate that, there's always a little bit of anxiety about everything new. We all went to first grade, we were all nervous, this is new, right? And so this is all a little bit, but I think the overriding thing is excitement, because this company has nothing short of a co-leader ambition. And we're not scared of anything, and they like that. And number 2, more opportunity for them. Yes. Yeah, Rick?
Yes. You just said moments ago that champion versus champion, right? So that means Renan Problema is fighting Ryan Bader. If that's the case, so what's the scenario for Francis Ngannou? Do you have an update about when he's fighting, who he's fighting?
We don't have an update. We're working on a very big fight with Francis and his team. We're targeting a mixed rules fight that we think would be the biggest fight of 2024 for Francis. So it would be under mixed boxing and MMA rules. We'd like to be able to put that together. We have 2 possible opponents, of which one is much more exciting than the other. But we don't have anything else that we could say right now. I don't want to speak out of school. You know us, we tend to not announce things before things are done. And we try to respect all kind of confidentiality. But we're working on stuff. We'd like to put it together. We think there's some mutual interest, and we're working really closely with Francis on it.
So we're not saying any names, Deontay Wilder or any other name?
No.
Okay, with that being said, sorry.
Yeah.
So the first title shot of the title fight this night, Gabriel Braga.
Yeah.
Do you think it was an early stoppage? Is there something going on about it? Maybe I don't know what happened to the referee.
You know, I respect everybody's, as my dad says, every job is easy until it's yours, right? And so you have to defer to the experts. I don't like anything that's on the early side. You know, you'd always like the late side, but then you worry about safety. So, you know, I have the same things that you guys think about all the time. You know, in hindsight, when you review the TV, you always like never to have anything stopped early. I haven't seen any of the replays yet to be able to comment on that.
Hey, Don, 2 quick ones for me. One, you mentioned several of the countries. I was curious what specific cities the PFL would be interested in going to in 2024.
I don't want to steal the thunder yet. We hope to be able, Pete Murray hopes to be able, and then before Christmas, to be able to give a schedule for next year. So I think this won't be long. I think this will be able to tell you 3 weeks, maybe 4 weeks at the most, to be able to outline the schedule for 2024. He's been working on that. We worked on that even before the acquisition was done. But as I said, 6 of the 8 events will be outside the U.S. Our focus will be on giving international fans more top-shelf product than they've been able to get before. Almost all of the league seasons of PFL is in the U.S. So we see this as a great complement to serving global fans.
And lastly for me, you mentioned moments ago that the Bellator shows would not have the outfit and the sort of uniform that the PFL ones have. Am I correct in assuming that we're bringing the sponsorships back to the shorts and maybe adding that additional income stream to the fighters?
Well, with the PFL now, they have a spot in the short that they get the income stream. Remember, we own a spot that we sell to national sponsors. They have a spot. So we'll run the same kind of thing with Bellator, of which the way that we call it everything clean but balanced is spots are controlled but spots are open. So we'll run the same kind of program with Bellator.
Hey Don, do you encourage Bellator fighters and PFL fighters to start calling each other out for fights leading into the next year?
I want everybody calling out for fights. You can call me out for a fight. No. Look, I think the more that people are open and expressive is good and it's interesting. I like to know what people are thinking. I don't like anything that's not authentic. You know, sometimes I think a lot of the fight talk is inauthentic, and I think fans know that, right? So anything that's really you, do it, right? Talk about it. But I think you can talk about it. Once again, we're all one company now, and we're all on the same mission to become the co-leader in this sport. So PFL fighters, Bellator fighters, we're all one fighter. Call out anybody you want to fight. Call out them, call out us, call out the guy on Mars. Do anything that you want to do to become the best in the world.
If you put $1 million on the line, I'd call you out for a fight.
Yeah, totally.
But,
exactly.
Last one, I think everybody was happy to hear on the MMA Hour you said that you guys were offering all 21 or so Bellator employees jobs within the new merged promotion. But you do have a fully staffed company, right? 52 or so employees on PFL side. So how is that really going to work? You don't want to. I'm sure you don't want to have two people doing one person's job. You know. So how would that play out?
We have a bigger meal to serve. We got 8 one-off events now, with 6 of those 8 internationally. So we need more people doing more things, number one. Number two, we also have more revenue to build. We have a whole new product that we've got to build that revenue stream off of, which hadn't happened under Paramount. So not only do we have an operational side of the business, we have a revenue side of the business. So we definitely need the bodies to do that. So we've told anybody who wants to work as relentless as we have, to go from 0 employees, 0 fighters, and 0 fans in 5 years to what we're talking about today, man, we can use all the bodies we can get. We got spots for you.
Hey Don, just
Yeah.
one for me. Obviously, Scott Coker has a good relationship with the guys over at Ryzen, and build that going. I'm curious, do you have any plans to maybe keep that alive?
It's interesting. I reached out to Ryzen 2 weeks ago, and I let them know that we'd be glad to talk to them, and we had one open spot on 2024 that we hadn't even booked the event yet. And if they'd like to talk to us about that, we'd be open to doing that. That was a huge, successful event, and we want to continue to do things different. And what does that event look like? TBD. But that event itself, I think, was interesting. That event was huge. You guys know that. You saw that event. So we've reached out and let them know that we're glad to talk about that, even as soon as putting it in the third or fourth quarter of next year.
Hey Don.
Yeah.
So you mentioned the word top shelf product and the word revenue. So what's the potential or possibility of us getting a PFL video game that comes to consoles?
So look, we want to do more intellectual property and more content in more places. Why? We got to grow our brand. Everybody who sees the product says awesome, but sometimes I go to the Verizon store, sometimes I go to Chick-fil-A, and I say, hey, do you watch the PFL? People go, what's that? And I go, ESPN Friday nights. They go, I love that, okay? But they don't know the PFL right away. So everything that we can do to have more content on more platforms with our brand, we do. Right now, we hadn't had the opportunity to do that with the right partner, but do we want to do that now that I think we're a little bit more established with a little bit more oomph? Yeah, we're going to look to do that next year. But we haven't had the opportunity to do that yet with the right partner, to be honest.
Let's give Mike from MMA Junkie.
Yeah.
I tweeted out your comment about wanting to do US Cyborg and Pacheco next, and Chris actually just responded saying lots of plans being made and announced. I've not had contact with anyone from PFL since news of the purchase. One thing I'll control is how my career finishes. So I guess just your thoughts on that response from her.
Yeah, we're not booking anybody's fights without talking to them. But we're just doing a champions versus champions card, which any champion who wants to fight will be able to fight any other champion. Any champion that doesn't want to fight won't participate. We can't make anybody fight, right? So we're not planning anybody's career, whether they're in the PFL or whether they're in the Bellator, other than we're doing a champions versus champions card. And all champions who will show up will show up. All who won't show up won't show up. Yes.
Tom, right here.
Yeah.
How does it feel to come to DC and have a historic event such as this in the capital?
Well, as many of you know, I live here, about 12 miles from here, Northern Virginia. I've been here about 25 years since I started working for America Online. And my first investor was Ted Leonsis, who was also my long-term business partner. Just so for me, it's less about the historic place and more about it takes me back to when we were nothing. And all of you have been nothing, and I've been nothing, and you try to become something. And you have a bunch of people tell you that won't work, you suck, no, or they don't even reply. We've all had that 1,000 times. And so what I like to know is on behalf of the fighters and the fans in our company, we're getting somewhere. We got a long way to go, but we're getting somewhere. And people said there'll never be another company other than UFC that's relevant, that's interesting, that's premium, that's good, that's global, that fighters want to be at, that media companies want to carry, or whatever other bad thing you want to say. And we're now there. So we've got a whole nother chapter, and then one other chapter after that. But we're relevant, and we're making a difference, and we're making a difference for a lot of people that care about MMA, and we're doing something different. And so that's really what I felt tonight, is to call it Chapter 1, check. Chapter 2, let's go.
We got time for one more.
Yeah.
Let me hit it over here. Go ahead.
Yeah.
Quick question. So I know everybody asked about the divisions when they came to Bellator and PFL. So given that you guys do have a women's 125 and a men's 135 in the European season,
Yes.
Would it go? So they were to win the championships over in the European series. Would they face the Bellator champions as well?
No, they wouldn't be ready to do that. Good question. As some of you have seen, in Europe, next year we're launching PFL Mideast in April. In 2025, we'll launch PFL Africa with Francis Ngannou as the chairman. Each of those areas start to build different divisions. so that we can add other divisions into the season. And we want to not start from scratch because then they'll be too weak. But those champions win a spot, but they're not ready yet to obviously challenge somebody as top notch as a Bellator champion or a PFL champion. As great as they are, like Dakota or Cedric, they're not at that level yet, and they've got to earn that a little bit more.
Let's give it up for Donn Davis.
Thanks, guys. Appreciate you coming.